Hello everybody, this is Professor Messner. It is now week 2 and I hope you're enjoying the class so far, but I wanted to tell you a little bit more about what you can expect in the second week. Last week you started in on chapter 4 and they talked about San Francisco and Los Angeles, and then in the second part of the chapter you learned a little bit more about Russia's presence in California, which to me was quite a surprise. But if you've been to the Marin County town of Ross, you know a little bit about that. And if you've done some Russian history, you also know about it. Chapter 5, we see a major transition because California is no longer being controlled by Spain. It's now being controlled by Mexico. But control is maybe not the right word for it because Mexico has a very slim or weak grip on Alta California at this particular time. But you're going to see an institution called the Rancho, and in a lot of ways this has been a romanticized time in California history, and it does bring about a new role for Indians, because the Indians have been on the missions and now supposedly they have their freedom, but it doesn't really seem like it's a freedom worth having. So I'd like you to take a look at that, how things change for Native Americans. And then I also want you to pay attention in Chapter 5 to the secularization of the missions. That also changes the landscape and the economic climate for California, and particularly for the Indians who've been living on the missions. Chapter 6 gets into the infiltration of the United States, and you really begin to see a convergence between American history and Mexican history, or you see California begin to play a role in American history, or the history of the United States. The book will talk about several individuals, Jed Smith being one of them, who really sort of are trailblazers, and I use that word advisedly, with California. Maybe they didn't try to Americanized California, but that was the upshot of the entire thing. So you might want to look at the motives of these men and why they did what they did, and of course what they did. And sadly, we also have to look at the Donner expedition. Very sad, probably been, a lot has been said about it in various types of media, but it is something I think worth looking at. Then, as we get into the first part of Chapter 7, we'll finish Chapter 7 next week, but as we get into the first part of Chapter 7, you're going to want to pay attention to the term manifest destiny, or the idea that God, in His infinite wisdom, has decreed that the United States should rule the North American continent from sea to shining sea. Of course, God did not mention this to the Mexican inhabitants or the Indian inhabitants of that particular part of the world, but what you going to do? Anyway, and then the last thing, although you'll study this more, next week will be John C. Fremont and his importance. So I certainly hope you enjoy the reading. Hope to see you soon. Keep the faith.